Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. Um, and as always, when we start our show, for everyone that's new here, we want to absolutely welcome you and appreciate you coming as you watch this video. And also in chat, be respectful of families, mods, and each other. And we'll discuss after a short presentation. We'll be answering any questions you have. Mrs. Steve is a little bit under the weather. She has either some type of allergies or a summer cold, and I think she's passed it along to me. I seem to have a little scratchy throat myself, so just have to bear with us a little bit tonight, but we'll get through it. And with that being said, we'll get started on the show. As tonight, we're going to be looking specifically at the Idaho homicides of Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana. Which happened at the university out there by the offender, Kohberger. And while we look at this case, as I was doing some research this week and trying to get back into the rhythm of things after our trip to Texas and working on the Crum Co case, I was doing some research and came across some interesting things. And I saw the traffic stop of where Kohberger was stopped by the lady police officer out in Idaho, and those interactions. And as I was listening to him speak and how he analyzes laws and how he has that narcissistic side to him, I came to realize something about some other things about his personality. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. We're going to be looking at other serial offenders, and then we're going to be talking specifically about some of the things that Kohberger has done in his past that might lead us to the point of is he setting the grounds that such as what BTK, once he was caught, that he will confess. So you just have to bear with me. But when we get to that point, I'll try to tell you certain things and of what makes me believe that is a possibility. And but with that being said,
one of those days. Yes.
Okay, I'm back.
There we go.
Okay, so anyway,
one of these days,
Mrs. Steve she's heavily medicated tonight, and so we just have to see what happens.
I'm not touching a thing.
Okay, but anyway, a lot of the serial offenders, such as Zodiac here, they would taunt law enforcement. They would send letters to local newspapers and introduce themselves and talk about their crimes and taunt them about the victims and the number of victims and how they interacted and what was going to be continued to not only taunt law enforcement, but to terrorize communities. And so it's something that we have to look at that is relatively interesting, that there's a lot of people that do these things. And of course, Zodiac was one. And then we have to look at others. Of course, we have BTK. Once again, that he had interactions with law enforcement and newspapers. But he also, when he had the chance to present his side of the story to the courts as part of his plea deal, that once the death penalty was put on the table, and he had to describe those crimes and do it in open court. Is this some shape, form, or fashion that we might see with Kohberger? And I think there is. I think there's a distinct possibility that when the DP is placed on the table, that Kohberger will have to face a decision. And there's some interesting things that he did in his background that leads me to believe that this is a possibility, because BTK had a manner of operation, and when he was up there describing his victims and how many victims he was stalking at any one time, and how he operated, and what he did at the scene, and how he remembered those crime scenes, and replayed them in his mind, because these offenders, they do it to feed whatever type of individual they are, their narcissistic needs, the that they're psychopaths, and so they have this fantasy life, and they will remember and relive these crimes that they commit by how they, like with BTK, of course, he um, did some photography and other things, but even if there is some part of uh, memorialization by photography, or if it's just through questionnaires or surveys, or ever how that taking notes, or just through their memories, or collecting some type of souvenir, that they'll relive that crime, because they have a way of remembering and associating how that crime was committed. And so we have to look at BTK on several levels, for the fact that while Kohberger was studying in Pennsylvania, his professor, of course, was one that had a great interest in BTK and had interactions with him. And not only with BTK, of course, she has, study of a background in all the serial offenders. And we have to look at that. And how good of a student was Kohberger, and what interest did he play with some of the people that they will have looked at? Because, and even in law enforcement, when we're studying and we're taking our courses on homicide or profiling, and while this information is presented to us, there's, of course, they bring out the cream of the crop, such as BTK, Ted Bundy, Green River Killer, the Golden State, and brings those individuals and their criminal history, so that we can look at it, analyze it, learn from it, and what steps law enforcement did, and what steps that these offenders took to highlight their crimes. Then, of course, we have the son of Sam, David Berkowitz. And when I was looking at him, there was something that popped out to me. And son of Sam also contacted law enforcement. And within those writings, there was a couple of revelations and of how he referred to himself. And is this part of, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about just as soon as I say it. He referred to himself as Papa Sam. And then if you look at the, it says that Papa Sam is old now. That's in the top paragraph, fourth line down. But then the final line in this is that I live for the hunt, my life, blood for Papa. And we have to associate that. Is there any other individual that possibly could have been associated with that referred to themselves as Papa? And of course, we have the theory that came out, that's out there about, of course, Papa Rogers. And of the evidence released, the homicide weapon has been consistent as a large fixed blade knife. This leads me to believe they found the sheath. This evidence was released prior to autopsy. And is this Papa related to that I have studied and looked at other serial offenders, and in some sick way that he was trying to refer back to, that he knew of and had studied patterns of other offenders? It was just something that stood out to me as I was looking at some of the research and trying to figure out um, if Kohberger at any point was trying to taunt society. Was he doing it through these social media questions that he asked? Because he asked a lot of strange questions and made observation. Papa Rogers did. Now, is Papa Rogers Kohberger? There's, of course, that theory, and there is that possibility that it is him. Law enforcement probably knows. Will that ever come out, or will they ever be able to establish that fact? I really don't know at this time. But there's something else that Kohberger did, and this is where we kind of have to flip the coin and totally turn it upside down on his head of what Kohberger did prior to Papa Rogers, prior to moving to Washington State and going to school there. And it was one of the things that, of course, a lot of information is out there about, and that was brought out by the Daily Mail when he did the survey on Reddit of trying to, that we looked at it from the standpoint, and you'll see what I'm saying here, that when he established that survey, and we all looked at it, and did we misread and misunderstand what was happening? Is this individual that he wasn't trying at that time to learn how to commit the perfect crime, but what if he was staging and already setting in his own little coy way and manner of establishing, this is how I'm going to commit my crime? Because we have to look at, he's 28 years old. He's well established in his life patterns. There's not going to be much advice to change anything that he hasn't already developed. He's a long way into his life and his career and whatever other criminal acts he's committed. So he already has a MO of how he tracks, finds victims, regardless of what crimes they were. And then we have to look at that. Not only is it that possibility that this is the way that he operates, and he's being coy and he's putting out there that, yes, I have victims, and I'm going to tell you how and what my thought process is. And we also have to look at from the point that if he ever did get caught and he had to stand before the judge and before the world and talk about what happened and why, if we look at these questions that he asked way back then, you'll see it's almost like a playbook that we've asked time and time again of on, if you look across all the YouTube creators out there, they've asked these questions in a lot of different ways. But Kohberger put them out there way before anyone knew that a crime would even happen. And this would be almost, if I was conducting an interview of him, this would be almost the exact order of questions that I would ask him and establish of why. And we're going to go through these questions one by one and look at them. And I want you to sit back and totally look at it from this standpoint that we're not, he's not asking for assistance at that time. He's telling you, this is how I'm going to relive these crimes that I've committed. This is how I approach my victims. This is how I act. These are the steps that I take. And you'll see as we go through these questions that he laid out in that survey, and you'll see the associations. And I do think that if the DP is put on the table, there is a great possibility that he will have to address these crimes, and he'll probably do it in this order. Being a narcissistic psychopath, an animal that he is, being this true evil, and that he was one-upped all the other, serial offenders that, of course, after they were committing crimes, they would contact and tell society that this is going on. But did he one-up them and go ahead and put almost his own little twist on it, that this is what I did. And we can look at the very first question, and this is something that a prosecutor would ask of him in court, or the judge would ask him in court, or even an investigator, that why did you choose that victim or target over others? And we've asked that, who was the victim and why were they chosen? And is this the way that he will remember his victim? Why did I choose her or them? And it's like I said, if we look at it from that this is just, he wasn't asking for advice. He's just laying out his game plan. Before making your move, how did you approach the victim or target? And we can know by looking at the affidavit, not only the search warrant affidavits, but the arrest warrant affidavits. What type of stalking, not only on cyber, but how many times did he travel to that neighborhood? How many times did he park a vehicle and walk around that residence? Because we know at one point he was close enough that he connected on Wi-Fi. And what was he studying, and what did he do prior to ever making a move? And you can look at some of his movements that they did through his digital trail, his cell phone signatures of how he was tracked and what was going on during those periods at different times, and in the early morning hours of when he would visit the area. Because and this would be something that he would do. And he says, he goes in a little bit more and he says, please detail what you were thinking and feeling, because this is exactly what these predators, these psychopaths, that part of their fantasy is. It's not just the actual crime of the homicide, but it's the stalking, it's the watching, it's the gathering of intel, it's interactions prior to that this victim has no idea that they're being stalked, or they're being someone has been in their residence. Not saying he had, but there is that possibility. Did he attend parties? Did he actually go in while they were gone? And did he know how, and if there was other keys, did he know how to access that residence regardless of anything else? And then he asked or he's stating that after committing a crime, what were you thinking and feeling? And is this part of his ritual of how he looked back on this crime or other crimes, and just reliving each and every step of that? And will he detail this if he does confess? If the DP's put out there and he has to look back at himself and he faces that judge, and will he be clarifying these questions? And of course, we got, how was your life right before the crime occurred? What was going on in his life? And of course, I would probably at some point get with Dr. Susan and ask of her this exact issue of how he would be feeling and what would be the common feelings of an offender prior to, during all this planning. What is that roller coaster ride of anticipation for the fact that these individuals, they, while they're stalking and everything, they're building, anticipating, and their emotions get on a higher and higher level as they get closer to the point of carrying out whatever their plan is. And then, of course, it says, did you prepare for the crime prior to leaving your home? And of course, we have an individual that we know was at home until the early morning hours of prior to the homicides occurring. And what steps did he take prior to that? And this is all part of the process of a narcissistic psychopath, that they would prepare. And not only preparing prior to leaving your home, but in the days before, because after the crime's committed, what other preparations have you made? And if you're reliving this crime in your mind, all of this is part of the game that you'll look back at. You'll try to, and we as normal humans, we can't even try to understand how these people would even contemplate carrying out such an act. Although we see it constantly in the news and we see it with these offenders. We saw it with BTK as he was standing up there and trying with, to shock the world and as he described the acts that he committed. And once again, there's a lot of times that he goes in here and says, please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this point, because this is exactly what these predators do. That when they relive that, if they have a souvenir or if they have photographs or a video of the act, how do they relive that moment? And is it through these questions that he looks back at, and as he looks at his survey, that he can at any point pull up, and it's not incriminating as far as what crimes he's committed, but he can relive that moment of how he committed or how he acted out each one of these questions. And then we go into his questions. What was the first move you made in order to accomplish your goal? And once again, we hit that. Please detail any thoughts or feeling at this point. Is this his playbook? Is this how he's reliving as each one of these questions plays through his mind? How did I accomplish this goal? How was I feeling at that point? And it's just very, very interesting to even contemplate that if he did this and this was his playbook. Like I said, he's 28 years of age. Is he asking for advice, or is he just telling the world, this is how I'm going to do it? This is how I'm going to relive. And this is how I'm going to confess if I ever have to confess. And then the question is did you commit the crime alone? And he answers, or no. If not, how many people were involved? And there was that moment of when he was arrested that law enforcement stated at one point, has anyone else been arrested? And is this aligning with his fantasy, or that he already has this developed plan in mind of establishing these facts? And of course, like I said, we go to the next question. After arriving, what steps did you take prior to locating the victim or target? And what steps were taken? There's a lot of controversy out there talking about everything, and from the DoorDash to traveling over there, turning off the phone, going off grid, and where did he park? How did he approach? And like I said, please detail your thoughts and feelings. What was going on once he parked his vehicle, and as he was approaching these people? How high of a high was he on, and what was his level of intense focus on what was about to occur? And when you look at it from that standpoint, it's very disturbing. And we have to look at it from the law enforcement perspective. When I was first looking at this whole survey, I was thinking that he needed help. But after I watched that, how he interacted with law enforcement, it kind of changed my way of how he was never fearful of law enforcement, of his interactions, and almost playing a game with them, and then apologizing that, oh no, I don't want you to be offended. And but then we get into the final questions. How did you accomplish your goal? And how was he able to accomplish that goal of committing 4 homicides in just minutes? And once again, as he was accomplishing these goals and committing these homicides, and now he's able to, how were you thinking and feeling about it? And what were those feelings? And I had always thought, because this next question is very something that has totally changed my mind since I'm looking at it from this standpoint. before leaving, is there anything else you did? I had always thought that he had accidentally left the sheath. But if we look at it from this standpoint of before leaving, and then the next question, how did you leave the scene? That when those first two victims failed to his scheme and his homicide, did he intentionally leave that sheath? Did, as his sister said, that he wore gloves and things whenever he was at home, had he washed and thought that he had removed all DNA from that sheath and was going to leave it as part of a staging? Because before leaving, is there anything else you did? Because this is a, almost like a signature or a calling card that he's asking about, or he's telling himself, or he's asking himself as he relives this crime, what did I do before I left? And did he intentionally leave that K-bar sheath for law enforcement to find? And because the last question, it says, how did you leave the scene? And you can look at leave as two different ways. Either how did you travel to the scene, and how did you leave the scene by some type of conveyance, such as his vehicle, his Elantra, or is it part of the staging? Did you do something to stage that scene? And when I look at it from this standpoint, it kind of changes me, that if he ever does, and is he setting that groundwork, and that he will confess if that DP is put on the table, and just like BTK, will he be able to relive these crimes through this survey or manifesto or his playbook? Because I seriously do believe that after seeing that vehicle stop, that this is extremely possible part of his whole plan from the get-go. But anyway, if you find it interesting, make sure you comment in here. And if you have any questions, we'll get to those now. And if you'll just pull it up, I don't know if you can't talk, I'll read the question. Dandelion says, is Brian trying to be studied like his idol? I now do believe that is the case. I think that he tried to re-up BTK and all the other offenders that had went out there, that he laid the groundwork, and he let the world know that not only because, was he trying to feed off others people's emotions and feelings of as they committed crimes, or is he just stating for a fact that this is how I committed my crimes? And if you ask me, I'll tell you why I picked out these victims.
It's gonna be a blue light.
Okay. Where the Wind Blows, $2 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate your support. We appreciate everyone's support, and that means a lot to us. We'll use that. Miranda Lee says, True Crime Web, don't you think BTK's court confession was as shocking as his crimes? I was rather surprised, and I was very glad that he had to sit there. But it's also that he is reliving those crimes, and he's getting, they psychopaths and how they relate to their crimes and how their understanding, they still don't feel any sorrow for their victims. The only thing they feel sorry for is that they were caught by someone that they feel is inferior to them, because BTK absolutely believed that he was smarter than anyone else in law enforcement. And I believe Brian Kohberger also exact same feelings. And but yeah, I was surprised with his confession in a lot of ways. Uh-huh. Cunningham, does BK still have internet access? I don't know. I would imagine so. because internet access can be used in a lot of different ways. Now, does it mean it's until he violates something and has some rules violations within the jail systems, he would have access to that. Also with contact with his attorneys and doing research. So I don't believe that he will have lost that. Don't mean he has it, but I don't believe he would. Cindy Lean, why not just plead not guilty? Why make court do it? Well, is this all part of his that he's hoping that the court makes some type of a mistake and it's just another level of protection or drawing out the drama, and he can live? He's in the limelight, and when we look at this individuals or any of these individuals, they want people looking at them, and they want that limelight because they're the most important person in the world. It's not their victims. It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with him. And I bring this point out to you that I hope he gets all the attention in the world. I hope that jury looks him in the eye, and that upon Judgment Day, that he does face that ultimate adjudication of his sentencing.
All right, hold on. All right, and another blue light.
Okay. Kamala Norris, $20. Blue light special, please. Mrs. Steve, good to see you, Mr. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Appreciate your support. Very nice of you.
All right.
Single mom of 4. Mr. Steve, do you think BK standing silent yesterday was his way of staying in control? Absolutely. He wants to control everything. How far would he push this? Until the moment of conviction, when he'll no longer have the opportunity to do anything by his own choice. Because now he does have certain things that the court will absolutely offer to him. And we saw how he manipulates and what he does. But yes, I do believe that everything this man does from day one of us becoming aware of him has been his way of trying to stay in control. Josh Taposh, did we find out if the university actually approved this study? I don't know if they did or not. And now I'm looking at it under this light, and I think that even if they approved of it or not, that it had a purpose. And I think it was his way of, at some point, of being able, through his coy, narcissistic self, of establishing that fact. That it served dual purpose, that if it was part of a study, it served dual purpose because it fed his fantasy world of how he was going to conduct himself, how he was going to relive his crimes. And he may have other victims out there that this refers to it. And because if this is his MO of how he acts and what he does, he's going to follow these guidelines because he already knew these questions with the survey. And so we have to credit him with that. It says, how long before the homicides did he do this survey? I think he followed his survey. I believe it was 5 months prior to. I think I read that somewhere. It was several months prior to. And I absolutely do believe at some point, because at the search warrant, they found other of his residents. They found some IDs of other females. Now, I don't know if those females are victims of any type of crime or what the relationship were. or were they potential victims, or are they actual victims of something that we're not aware of? But I think that, yes, he followed his survey. This was his playbook, and it will be his playbook all the way up to the point that if he has to confess, that this will be the manner that he will do so. Josh DePosh, Steve, do you find any significance in that BK pleaded standing mute or silent just like BTK? Or is that a common plea and shouldn't necessarily be read too much into it? No, I take it as, we know, uh, would it ever occur to an average person to not answer that? No. And is his hero BTK? Because we know the professor had that was training him and teaching him and providing the course um, in Pennsylvania, that her interactions with BTK were significant. And was BTK idol of his? It appears that it's very possible. Molly, True Crime Web, do you think that Papa Roger was BK? There is a lot of similarities that when we look at um, of, of who was chosen, how they were chosen, and if you read some of these questions with what and how Papa Rogers asked certain questions, then there's a lot of similar words, um, and that was written in that. And is Papa Rogers that great of an investigator mind that he could have done that? So I I would say more probable than not, yes. In my opinion, that Papa Roger is BK.
Okay, you've got a blue light for 6 months.
Okay, sure.
Membership
All
for
right.
Josh.
Hey, Josh, thank you for your membership for 6 months. Absolutely appreciate it. Helps us a lot. Josh Spice, if BK left the sheath as a calling card, would it be that he would leave a sheath or something similar to all other crimes? And if we see this and we look at this as if this is his plan of action, his MO, how he does certain things, and is a signature, then yes, I think that he will have left something significant at each of his crime, either a sheath or a calling card. Now, is it recognized as that or being associated with him? Law enforcement will be looking at that of those crimes and see if that is true. But yes, if this was his first crime, which I don't think it was, but if he was ever to commit another crime, would he leave a calling card such as that sheath? Absolutely. Moon Dancer, how long do you think he thought about this? Well, at least for him to come up with this survey and being in the course of criminal studies that he was in, I would think months and years. Absolutely. Nick 76. What do you think his motive would be for confessing? Is there just too much evidence against him, and would a confession mean that most of the details of the case don't get released? Um, his motive for confessing would be that don't want to die. you know, I do not want to face whatever DP is put on the table that he'll have to face out there in Idaho. And we'll just have to look at what that manner of death might be. And but like I said, hopefully he will be pressured into a confession, and that he will accept it and he'll own up to it. And I'm hoping most of the details are released for the fact that it absolutely, without a doubt, removes all possibilities that he didn't that he is innocent. And I do not think so for the fact of everything that this is just my personal opinion. Of course, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. He hasn't been proven guilty yet. But do I believe that they have the right guy? Absolutely. Doesn't mean he is the right guy, but I do believe that he is. Dandy Linus, does anyone else think he would have done it again if not caught? I do. And did he do it before? Great possibility. Because after this crime, what did he do? He went home and, of course, cleaned up, changed, before he went home, he went to other areas and went off the grid once again for a long period before he came on the grid, and then he went home and then leaving and traveling again. And able to go back into society and interact with people and discuss the crime and give his thoughts and his opinions on it to people that he knew before he committed this specific crime. And no one was the wiser that he was the offender. And so for him to be able to accept that he had committed 4 homicides and then go back into his daily routine as if nothing happened, that tells you the exact monster that he is. Josh Sapaj, does drug contribute to the condition of being a psychopath, or is there another cause and drug use not necessarily part of the making of one? That is a great question, and that is above my pay grade. I will have to ask Dr. Susan on that, and I will take that question. And whenever Dr. Susan is on, remember, Josh, ask this specific question for that, because that is a absolute, and I'm not, like I said, that's well above my pay grade. Now, are a lot of crimes committed under the influence of some type of drug or alcohol? Absolutely. What part and how much does it contribute? I don't know. Do you think it bothers him to have a woman lawyer? I hope so. I, I absolutely hope that him having to rely upon a woman attempting to save his life, that it keeps him awake at night. Absolutely hope so. Has his instructor been looked into? This is really a sadistic case from what little I know about it. Well, his Pennsylvania is a well-known professor, has written books and has a career. But actually, Dr. Susan, I can't remember the relationship they had, but or knows of. But Dr. Susan was very familiar with the professor. But now you're talking about he had another instructor or of where he was going to Washington State. I don't know about that instructor, but if you're talking about the professor in Pennsylvania, is different. But I don't know who the professor in Washington State was. But I would imagine anyone that he was associated with or had any interaction or was in his call list or in his apartment buildings or any shape, form, or fashion that crossed paths with Kohberger that could be established has been looked into. Ruckus. Steve, how hard would you have tried to convince and plead with him that you should be one of the units that got to pull him over during this trip home? um,
Be nice.
I would hope that my chain of command would have and they usually did have great confidence in me to make sure I got the job done. But yes, I would have been at the front of the line, and I probably would have tried to put a pit maneuver on whoever was going to execute the stop, so I could get first in line. I've been in trouble. They would have had to rewrite some of the.
No doubt.
Josh, I'm hearing rumors in other channels that the two IDs found within a glove were not the victims. Any LE confirmation of that? Don't know, and I agree. I don't really know if they were or not, and it would shock me if they were. I'm hopeful they were, but it would shock me if they were. But those two IDs, regardless of who they are, um, um, I'm sure they've been interviewed. Hopefully, they're still around and being able to be interviewed. Come on, Nars, $5. Do you think BK was in the house when no one was home? He did a few drive-bys. I think the biggest possibility of him being in there is when Wi-Fi connected with his phone. For some reason, he took a risk at some point, and he was extremely close to the residence. And now, how long was Wi-Fi connected with whatever device it connected with? But of all of them, that and what would cause him to leave his device on? And was there times that the device was off, that he was in the area and he didn't take the phone with him? But yes, I think there's a great possibility, especially if you look at and you look at this as a playbook. And before making your move, how did you approach the victim or target? And and if you look at it as a playbook, then yes, if he could have gotten in that residence prior to committing the crime, he would have gotten in that residence.
All right, and I do believe that is it. Let me run back through here.
All right. But we want to thank everyone for being here tonight. And as we go through this, and if we see anything else, appreciate everyone's support. We're slowly but surely getting caught back up and getting back on our normal routine of looking at a lot of different cases. Okay. Molly, it would be so creepy to be a female that didn't live in that house and BK had your ID. Two others he was planning next. Very, yes. And the whatever type of therapy or that they'll have to look at and for the rest of their life, because I can't imagine the fears that they'll face of how close did they become to being a victim of this individual. If it's true about those IDs and who are they, because I can't imagine, from my standpoint.
Okay.
Miss Siren, why do you think BK picked such a remote small town? Did other serial offenders do this? Well, each serial offender, BTK, of course, was in Wichita. And then Ted Bundy went to crowded beaches. But all of them, and then you had Green River up in Washington State. But all of them, regardless, they are attracted to certain areas. And when you have a large pool of potential victims, because a lot of times these victims are from prostitution, and those victim pools are larger with larger metropolitan areas. And so a lot of serial offenders will do that. But BK went to a community that had two universities, and was he trying to hide in the crowd as a student? And he was able to for a while, but law enforcement, and we have to give credit to law enforcement. We often see where law enforcement underperforms, and due to that underperformance, cases will become cold. That was not the the case in this homicides. Law enforcement stepped up and did a spectacular job, and we have to give them credit for that. And do I think that Kohberger wanted to get caught? Absolutely not. He's narcissistic. You can see through his interaction with that police officer during that traffic stop of how, he's being smug, coy, playing games, and saying, I hope you're not offended by my questions and his interactions, and trying to see and trying to explain why he shouldn't be considered at fault. It's the state of Pennsylvania that has put him in this position of not knowing the laws of Idaho or other states, and just being narcissistic.
All right, you're done.
All right, guys, I appreciate y'all being here tonight. Mrs. Steve's not feeling well, so we're not going to prolong it any more than we have to tonight. If you like this video, absolutely give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share, get the word out there. Our channel is growing, and as it grows, we're able to have a larger footprint and work our cold cases. And I absolutely appreciate everyone that supports this channel just by views, by their comments, the thumbs up, the donations, and not only here, and the mods. We couldn't do this without our mods. And the foundation is doing well, is growing. I'm about to go up to Pennsylvania to get some lab work done on one of our cold cases. And so we're proceeding with all of that, and we couldn't do it without this community. And we absolutely are in awe of you, and absolutely look forward for our continued relationship. And we just want to thank each and every one of you. But y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.